You don't need to come back. Just let her rest there for a while. She'll adjust. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I had. I'd stepped back inside the house to grab my scarf. The autumn chill had crept up earlier than usual. And there they were, standing by the kitchen sink, speaking low like I was already gone. My son and his wife. My only child. My daughter-in-law, who couldn't even say my name when she thought I might hear. The scarf hung from my hand, limp and suddenly meaningless. My ears buzzed. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Just listened. She's not coming back, John, Kelly continued. Don't give her the house key. She doesn't need it anymore. That was when I turned around and stepped out as quietly as I'd entered. Out onto the porch of the guest house. My home, or so I'd thought. At 73, you stop expecting things. You stop expecting daily phone calls. You stop expecting birthdays to be remembered, or your tea brewed the way you like. But there are some things you still believe in, like not being pushed out of your own life without so much as a conversation. I sat down slowly on the wooden bench outside, my knees aching in that dull, familiar way. Across the lawn, the main house gleamed. 2 stories of pale brick, a wraparound porch, and a swing that had hung there since my husband, Frank, put it up in 1984. We bought this land together. He built the swing. I planted the rose bushes. We'd added the guest house later, thinking one day a grown-up John might want to stay close. And he did. But not for me. After Frank died, and after John lost his job in the city, he moved in with Kelly and the kids. Just until we find our feet again, Mom, he'd said. I gave them the main house. It made sense. Bigger rooms, more space for the children. I stayed here in the guest house. Cozy, manageable, quiet. Years passed. John found work again. They painted over the porch, tore out the roses. I wasn't asked. Still, I adapted. That's what women like me do. We adapt. We don't complain. We make banana bread and offer to babysit. We nod and smile when the young ones roll their eyes. But hearing those words, don't give her the key. That wasn't just exclusion. That was exile. I sat there for over an hour, scarf still in my lap, trying to work out what had changed. Why now? Why this? The signs had been there, I suppose. Kelly's half smiles, the way she flinched if I touched a dish towel or corrected the thermostat. John's slow withdrawal from conversation, from eye contact, from shared memories. Even the children had stopped coming around. I thought they were just busy. I wanted to believe that. But now I knew. They weren't planning to send me to the wellness retreat for a month of relaxation and assessment. They were trying to move me out permanently. A facility, as Kelly called it. With other people your age, it'll be nice. You'll have friends. I had friends once, but they're all dead or too far gone to know the day of the week. What I had now was this land, this guest house, my chair by the window, my rose mug with the chipped lip, my life. Shrinking, yes, but still mine. And the one thing they had clearly forgotten, the thing they assumed I'd forgotten too, was this. The house wasn't theirs. Frank and I never transferred ownership. We never put John's name on anything. The deed was still in my filing cabinet, in the drawer with the faded stamps and the last letter Frank ever wrote me. I stood up slowly, bones crackling, and walked back inside. My tea had gone cold. I poured it out and made a fresh cup. This time I added sugar. 2 spoons. I never took sugar, but tonight I needed it. At the table, I opened the drawer and took out the file. The paper was old, but the ink was crisp. My name, my husband's, clear as day. They didn't know, or they'd forgotten. Either way, it was time I remembered who I was. I wasn't going anywhere. By morning, The sky hung low and gray, as if it too carried a weight it couldn't name. I didn't sleep well. I hadn't expected to. I kept waking up every hour, glancing at the outline of the deed folder on my desk, like it might vanish overnight if I didn't keep watch. I made oatmeal for breakfast. The plain kind. No butter, no sugar. My appetite was somewhere else entirely. I sat by the window, watching Kelly load the kids into the SUV, her ponytail too tight, lips pressed thin. She didn't look over. Maybe she knew I'd heard. Maybe she didn't care. John's car was still in the drive. He was probably working from home again, in his corner office, that used to be our dining room. I remembered how Frank used to sit at that very table, sketching blueprints, his fingers ink-stained, his coffee always forgotten and cold. Now there were spreadsheets and sales calls where our family dinners had once lived. The mug in my hand was warm, but I didn't drink. I just stared at it, letting my thoughts gather themselves into something sharper than hurt. I'd been foolish. That was clear now. I'd let them grow comfortable in a house that didn't belong to them. Let them believe my silence meant surrender. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. In the back of the closet was a canvas bag with leather handles, Frank's old legal bag. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Inside were all the original property documents, sealed in a plastic folder. I ran my finger along the crease where Frank had folded it years ago. I could almost hear his voice. Keep everything in order, Ida. Don't trust memory alone. It was all there. The deed, the insurance, even a notarized letter from the bank manager confirming full ownership had passed to me after Frank's death. They had no idea. The phone rang just after 10. I let it go to voicemail, as I often did these days. Then it rang again. John. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice unusually bright. "Just wanted to check if you're all packed. We'll be leaving around 3. "Packed?" I asked slowly. "For the retreat, the place Kelly found for you. With the mineral baths, remember?" I paused. The nerve of him, pretending this was all for my benefit. "Yes," I said quietly. "I remember." He mistook my tone for approval. "Great. Kelly's already paid the deposit. You'll love it. Peaceful, nice people, everything taken care of." I nodded to myself. "And how long am I staying? A month, maybe a bit more? We'll see how you like it." I held the silence just long enough to hear him shift in his chair. "All right," I said. "I'll be ready." It wasn't a lie. I'd be ready, just not the way he thought. After I hung up, I made a list. Not groceries, not errands, not anymore. This one was titled Control. It had 4 items. Lawyer bank mail forwarding. Locks simple. Precise. No emotion. At noon, I walked down to the bus stop. Didn't ask John for a ride, didn't inform anyone. Just left a note on the counter. Out for errands. Back by evening. That should satisfy the script they expected of me. The law office hadn't changed much since Frank and I had first walked in together to draft our wills. Same secretary. Same dusty potted plant. Mr. Halverson, the lawyer, was older now. But then, so was I. "I'd like to review the title deed," I said, once we were seated. He adjusted his glasses, flipped through the file I handed him. "Still in your name, Mrs. Mason. No transfers, no liens. You're the sole owner. And if someone else is living there, assuming they have rights?" He looked at me over the rims. "Then they're mistaken." I nodded. "Good." He sat back. "Are you considering a transfer?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm considering an eviction." His pen froze midair. Then he nodded slowly. "Would you like to begin the process formally?" I paused. My fingers tightened around the armrest. "Not yet. Not until they show me exactly who they think I am." Back outside, the wind picked up. I pulled my coat tight around me and felt, for the first time in months, entirely awake. They thought they were removing an old woman who'd gotten too quiet. But what they didn't know was that silence has teeth. By the time I got home, the sun had begun its slow dip behind the oak trees, lining the far edge of the yard. The house looked the same, peaceful, picture perfect. But I saw it differently now. Not as a haven, not as a memory, as a stage. A place where I had been written out of the script, told to smile, step aside, and leave. My coat was still warm from the bus ride. I didn't take it off. Instead, I walked straight into the guest house and went to the kitchen drawer where I kept the spare keys. I laid them all out on the table. One for the main house, one for the garage, one for the shed. Symbols, all of them, of a quiet kind of power I had never planned to use. I slipped the main house key into my pocket and tucked the others away. At 3 sharp, John knocked on the guest house door. Not like family, like a landlord checking on a tenant. I opened it slowly. He wore that fixed smile he reserved for work events, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Mom, ready?" I looked at his hands. Empty. No suitcase. No food for the road. No warmth. "I packed light," I said. "It's just a wellness retreat after all." "Right," he said, glancing over my shoulder, like he expected Kelly to materialize behind me with a checklist. "Kelly's inside with the kids. She's handling things." Of course she was. We walked across the yard in silence. The gravel crunched beneath our shoes. He didn't look at me. I didn't offer conversation. Inside the main house, the air smelled of lavender and lemon. Not a scent I chose. There were no traces left of the home Frank and I built. The photographs on the mantel were all new. John, Kelly, the kids. No wedding photo, no Frank, no me. Kelly was in the kitchen, arranging snacks into plastic containers with surgical precision. She looked up, forced a smile. "Ida," she said, "you look, well." "So do you," I replied, and I meant it. She looked like someone who had won something, except the prize was mine. She didn't offer a hug. I didn't pretend to expect one. "The car's warmed up," John said, grabbing his keys. "I'll just use mine," I said casually, pulling the Toyota fob from my coat pocket. Kelly blinked. "You're driving yourself?" "I prefer to be independent," I said simply. There was a moment of silence, brief but sharp. John scratched the back of his neck. "Okay, just send us a text when you get there, all right?" "Of course." I turned and walked out. No fanfare. No goodbyes. Back in the guest house, I didn't pack. Instead, I changed into my gardening boots and walked around the perimeter of the property, checking locks. The side gate creaked. I made a note to oil it. The shed's latch had rusted. I'd fix that too. Everything was mine, and it was time I began to act like it. Back inside, I sat at the table with the file folder and opened my laptop. I logged into the county's property records website, pulled up the parcel number, and printed out the current ownership page. My name. No co-owners, no trusts. Just Ida Mason. Then I emailed it to Mr. Halverson. "Please prepare draft notice of revoked access. This is a private matter. I will instruct when to proceed formally. Simple. Cold. Professional." At 6:30, Kelly knocked. I didn't answer. She called out, "Ida, do you need help with anything?" In that clipped, sweet tone people use on the elderly when they want to pretend they care. I didn't reply. After a few seconds, I heard her footsteps retreat. I waited another hour. Then I turned off all the lights and walked out into the night. The grass was soft beneath my boots. The stars overhead blinked, silent witnesses. I walked to the main house, used the key, and stepped inside. Their coats hung on the rack, their shoes lined up like soldiers. I didn't touch a thing. I just walked the rooms. Not as a guest, not as a mother, but as the owner, the one they'd counted out too soon. In the kitchen, a pot of soup sat cooling on the stove. I opened the fridge. My name wasn't on anything. It didn't need to be. I left just as quietly, locking the door behind me. Back in the guest house, I wrote one line in my notebook. They think they've moved me out, but I'm only just moving in. By morning, their plan was already unraveling, and they didn't even know it yet. I sipped my tea slowly, watching the blinds shift in the early breeze. Across the yard, the main house buzzed with activity. John's voice filtered through the open window, too faint to make out. Kelly's heels tapped back and forth on the hardwood. The kids slammed doors, laughed, barked orders at each other. It was their house, in their minds, their domain, but not on paper. I checked my email. Mr. Halverson had replied, "Draft ready. Formal revocation notice prepared. Let me know when you wish to deliver." I stared at the screen, heart calm. No tremor, no doubt. Not yet. Not today. Let them have their illusion one more day. Let them believe I'd be gone by evening. Let them enjoy their coffee, their routines, their confidence. I needed them fully settled into their lie before I peeled it away. At 9 o'clock, John tapped on the guest house door again. I opened it without a smile. "Morning, Mom," he said, clutching a folder. "Kelly printed everything you'll need for the retreat. Brochures, intake forms, directions. It's a really lovely place." "Very kind," I said, taking the papers without looking. "You sure you want to drive yourself?" "I'm sure." He lingered. You know we're just thinking about your well-being, right? It's not about anything else." I tilted my head slightly. "Of course." His relief was so obvious, it made me want to laugh, like he thought those soft words were a balm for what he'd said the day before. Like a line about my well-being would make me forget, "Don't give her the house key." "You'll text us once you arrive?" he asked. "I will." He turned to leave, then paused. "Hey, do you, need some cash? For snacks or anything?" I stared at him. For a moment, it was almost absurd. The son I paid through college, the man whose mortgage I once covered, offering me snack money like I was a Girl Scout. "I have enough," I said, and closed the door gently in his face. I didn't drive to the retreat. Instead, I took a different route, one that led to the county courthouse. The records office was quiet, cool, and smelled faintly of paper and lemon polish. The woman at the counter, polite but disinterested, stamped my request form and printed the latest property assessment. Again, my name. Sole owner, no changes. I tucked it into my bag alongside the deed and Halverson's draft letter. Next, I visited the locksmith. An old friend's son ran the place. I'd taught him in 7th grade. 3 locks changed, I said. Main house only. Guest house stays the same. I'll provide access. Quietly, please. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Tomorrow morning work? Perfect. Back at home, I folded laundry and made soup. I cleaned the kitchen. I listened to classical radio. Nothing out of place, nothing out of the ordinary. At 4:00 p.m., I watched from the window as John and Kelly loaded the kids into the car. "Tell Grandma goodbye," Kelly called out to them. They waved in my direction without looking. Then they were gone. No note, no hug, no ceremony, just gone. I stood in the living room for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I stepped into the main house with my key one last time. I took only what was mine: a box of photographs from the upstairs closet, a cookbook that had belonged to my mother, A pair of earrings Frank gave me in 1976, hidden behind the laundry shelf. Nothing more. I walked back across the yard, set the items on my table, and finally, let myself cry. Quiet tears. Not of sorrow, but of clarity. They thought I was leaving, but tomorrow morning, it was they who'd be shut out. The locksmith arrived at 8:06 a.m. sharp. A quiet, red-headed man named Mason, barely 30, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. I opened the front gate for him myself. "Thanks for coming early," I said. "No trouble at all, Mrs. Mason. My mom said you were one of her favorite teachers." "Then she was a good student." He smiled. We got to work. The locks on the main house were old brass. Frank had picked them himself. Mason moved efficiently. No questions. No chatter. I watched from the porch swing as he replaced each one, labeling the new keys with stickers. When he finished, he handed me a small envelope with 4 shiny new copies. I slipped one into my coat pocket, one into the drawer in the guest house, and the other 2 into the safe beneath my bed. "Everything okay, ma'am?" Mason asked gently as he packed up. "Better than it's been in a long time," I said, and meant it. When he left, I walked through the main house one more time, testing each lock. Front door, side entrance, garage access, all secure. On the kitchen counter, the family calendar was still hanging. September. Notes scribbled in Kelly's handwriting. Dentist, soccer game, PTA. But next week, starting Monday, it was blank. No return date for me. No reminder to pick me up from the retreat. I took the calendar down, folded it in half, and tossed it into the recycling bin. Then I went back to the guest house and sent an email to Mr. Halverson. Proceed with notice. Formal delivery by post and certified mail. No discussion required. By lunchtime, the silence around the property felt strange, like the house was holding its breath. No footsteps, no slammed doors, no music blaring from the upstairs bedrooms. Just wind through the trees and the low hum of my kettle boiling. I made myself a sandwich and ate it slowly at the table, rereading the property documents for the 5th time that week. Not because I doubted them, but because I wanted to feel the full weight of what was mine. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Kelly. "Hope you've settled in nicely. Let us know if the retreat has puzzles or book clubs. The kids want to visit once you're acclimated." No mention of how I was. No address questions. Just a pat on the head from a woman who assumed I'd been tucked away neatly. I didn't reply. At 5:30, John called. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. How's the place?" I kept my voice even. "Comfortable. Glad to hear it. Kelly said she texted, oh, and let us know if you need anything sent over, clothes or your knitting bag or whatever." "I have what I need," I said. There was a pause. "Well, we'll stop by later this week. Bring the kids. They already miss you." I said nothing. Let the silence hang just long enough for him to squirm. "Okay, well, talk soon." He hung up before I could answer. After dinner, I walked the yard again. My yard. The grass was dry from the late heat, but the trees were turning gold at the tips, little flashes of truth showing through. I sat on the porch swing in front of the main house, the one Frank built. It swayed gently under my weight, creaking like old bones. I ran my fingers along the armrest, where he'd carved our initials so faintly no one ever noticed. Still there. Still ours. Inside, the lights were off. The house was quiet. Tomorrow, the certified letters would arrive. And then they would know. I hadn't gone anywhere. The letters went out Monday morning. I received the tracking notifications before breakfast, one to John's email, one to Kelly's, and a physical copy sent by certified mail to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. Mr. Halverson had been thorough. Formal language, unemotional tone, citations from the property code. They'd open the envelope and find what they feared most, written in crisp legal print. Effective immediately, all unauthorized use of the property at 312 Mill Creek Lane, including the primary residence, is revoked. I didn't wait for the fallout. I made tea, swept the front porch, watered the withering mums by the steps. I kept my hands busy, but my ears alert. At 11:17 a.m., I heard the engine. John's car pulled up too fast, tires crunching across the gravel with more force than necessary. He parked at an angle, he never used to do that, and marched toward the front door of the main house. He reached for the handle. It didn't turn. I watched from the guest house kitchen window. He rattled the knob, then stepped back, confused, pulled out his phone, made a call. Pacing. Then he spotted me. I didn't move, just watched him, a cup of tea in my hand. He hung up and crossed the yard toward me, jaw tight. I met him at the door, opened it before he knocked. "What is this?" he asked, waving the envelope in the air like it was some strange joke. "What's going on, Mom?" "Exactly what it says," I answered calmly. "You changed the locks? Sent legal notices? Are you serious?" "I am." He blinked, stunned, like I had spoken another language. "You could have just talked to us." "Like you talked to me?" I asked. "Before you decided I wouldn't be coming back?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "We didn't mean." "You meant it enough to make plans, to leave without a goodbye, to pretend I was a problem being quietly removed." He lowered his hand. The letter trembled slightly. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said, softer now. "Kelly." She thought maybe it was time. "The kids don't know how to talk to you anymore. You've become distant." "No, John," I said, stepping outside. "I became invisible. There's a difference." He looked down at his shoes. "You live in that house like it's yours. You throw parties, change the paint, hang photos, all under my roof. And when I stopped being useful, you tried to send me away like I was a broken lamp. That's not fair." "What part?" I asked. "The groceries I paid for? The mortgage I never asked you to cover? The decades I spent building this life before you ever paid a tax bill?" He went quiet again. Behind him, the mailbox flag stood raised. I nodded toward it. "That's the physical copy. Keep it. You'll need it." "Where are we supposed to go?" he asked, and I caught it. The panic in his voice, raw and unexpected. "That's not for me to decide. You'd put your own son out?" I looked at him long and hard. "You already put your mother out, John. I'm just showing you how it feels." He turned without another word and walked back across the yard. Not angry, just stunned. For the first time, he understood I wasn't bluffing. Later that day, the doorbell rang. It was Kelly. Hair perfect, smile tight, voice carefully modulated. "Ida," she said, "surely we can talk this through." "I'm listening." "Maybe we started off wrong. Maybe this retreat idea was premature. But legal action? Notices? Don't you think that's a bit extreme?" I didn't answer right away. She glanced past me, into the house. "Think of the kids. This is their home." "No," I said quietly. "It's mine. You forgot that." She straightened her blouse. "Well, then I guess we'll talk to a lawyer." "You're welcome to," I said, "but you won't find what you're looking for." She left without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in the main house living room. My living room. The one they'd filled with pale furniture and meaningless art. I turned off the overhead lights and lit a single lamp by the fireplace, just like Frank used to do. Then I sat and waited, not for them, but for peace. And it came. By morning, the silence from their side had turned from stunned to strategic. I knew the signs. No messages, no knocks, no cars pulling into the drive. They were regrouping, calling someone, asking for advice, maybe even trying to find a loophole they could squeeze through. I sat at the dining room table in the main house, drinking coffee from my mother's china. The table they'd replaced, sleek and modern, cold to the touch, still stood firm. But the house no longer belonged to it. It belonged to me again. I was taking it back, one breath at a time. At 10:41 a.m., a text from John finally arrived. We need to talk. Tonight. All of us. Please. I waited 5 minutes before replying. 6 p.m. Main house. You may knock. Simple. Formal. I wanted them to feel the difference. At 6:02, the knock came. I opened the door. John looked worn, like he hadn't slept. Kelly stood next to him, perfectly composed but tight around the mouth. The kids weren't with them. This was going to be an adult conversation. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They sat across from me at the table, two people clinging to a version of reality that was quickly crumbling. John cleared his throat. We talked to a lawyer. I figured you would. He said, well, he confirmed the deed is in your name. Yes. But there must be some mistake, Kelly cut in, trying to mask urgency with civility. We've lived here for years. The kids go to school here. We've paid for... You've paid for nothing that wasn't reimbursed, I interrupted calmly. Groceries, sure. But the mortgage, taxes, insurance, all covered by my accounts. And your retreat plan? Paid in advance. From my savings. Kelly flushed, her mask slipping just a little. We thought it would be good for everyone, John said quickly. Some space. You've seemed withdrawn, lonely. I was lonely, John, I said, locking eyes with him. But not anymore? They were quiet. I'm not evicting you today, I continued. You'll have time. 2 weeks. That's more than fair. You can't be serious, Kelly whispered. I am. You have until the 1st. After that, the locks stay changed. I've already spoken to Halverson about filing for formal possession. This is outrageous, she hissed, standing. You're punishing us. I'm protecting myself, I said. Something I should have done years ago. John stayed seated. He looked around the room slowly. The crown molding, the fireplace, the staircase he once tumbled down as a boy. Then he looked at me. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. He nodded once. We'll figure something out. You always do. They left without slamming the door. That, at least, they remembered. That night, I lit a fire in the hearth for the first time in years. I sat near the warmth, wrapped in the old Afghan blanket Frank's mother had knitted for us as a wedding gift. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I felt like the author. The house was quieter now. Not just because they had stopped coming by unannounced, or because the shouting matches had ended before they began, but because something in me had settled. The kind of quiet that follows a storm. Not peace, exactly, but the beginning of it. I spent the morning sorting through closets. Not theirs, mine. The upstairs bedroom still held boxes I hadn't touched since Frank died. Back then, I'd moved into the guest house out of practicality, but also grief. I hadn't wanted to sleep in the same bed where we'd shared 37 years. It felt too large without him, too cold. Now, I opened one of the cedar chests at the foot of that bed. Inside were flannel sheets, his favorite scarf, a photo album I didn't remember putting there. The pictures inside weren't organized. They were just snapshots. Backyard barbecues, John as a baby in a washtub, our first Thanksgiving in this house. In one, I stood on the porch, younger than Kelly is now, holding a pie with flour on my nose and laughing. No one in the photo was alive anymore, except John and me. And now, we were strangers with the same blood. I didn't cry. I just closed the album and put it aside. At noon, Evelyn called, my granddaughter, John's daughter from his first marriage. "Grandma?" Her voice was a balm, soft, unsure, but kind. "I heard things are tense over there. Things are clearer than they used to be," I said. She exhaled. "Dad's freaking out." "I imagine he is." I just wanted to say, "I understand." About everything. That surprised me. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "You do?" "I've been watching it happen for years," she said. "The way they treat you like furniture. Useful, but easy to move." There was a long pause between us, filled only by understanding. "Do you want me to come by?" she asked. "Not to talk about them, just to see you." "Yes," I said, before I could stop myself. "I'd like that very much." She came by that afternoon, drove herself in a little silver hatchback with a cracked bumper and a university parking pass on the mirror. She brought coffee and a loaf of sweet bread she'd baked herself. We sat in the kitchen. Not the one in the guest house. The big one. Mine. "You know," she said, peeling the label off her coffee cup, "you were the only one who ever remembered my piano recitals." "You were very good," I said. "They said it was a phase, but you sat through every one." I smiled faintly. "That's what grandmothers are for." She hesitated, then looked me in the eye. "You know they say you're doing this out of spite, right?" "I'm doing it because I remembered who I am." Evelyn nodded slowly. "If you ever want someone to move in here, I mean, even just for a while, I could help with groceries, repairs, whatever. You shouldn't be alone." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'd rather be alone in my own home than invisible in someone else's." She stayed until the sun started to set. When she left, I stood on the porch and watched her car disappear down the long curve of the driveway. I wasn't alone. I was remembered. The final week began with rain, a steady, soaking kind. The kind that seeps into the ground and stays there. It softened the yard, streaked the windows, and brought a chill that settled in my bones. I pulled out one of Frank's old flannel shirts and wore it like armor. Evelyn came by again on Tuesday. She brought stew in a mason jar and helped me clean the shelves in the laundry room. It wasn't about the shelves, of course. She just wanted to be near, to be present. "They've started packing," she said quietly as she handed me a sponge. I didn't ask who. I already knew. "Kelly's furious. Dad just looks lost." I rinsed my hands in the sink and dried them slowly. "Let them be," I said. "They'll figure it out, or they won't." Evelyn nodded. She didn't argue, didn't try to soften the edge of it. That's what I loved about her. She understood when silence was more powerful than pity. Later that day, I walked the perimeter of the house. The rose bushes Kelly had neglected were blooming again, despite the season. Small, pale flowers pushing through rain and memory. I knelt down and pruned them carefully, like I used to. That's when I heard the shouting. John and Kelly arguing on the side porch. "She doesn't mean it," Kelly snapped. "She's bluffing. It's a power play." "She's not bluffing," John said, and for once, his voice was quiet, flat. "The deed is real. The lawyer's real. She's within her rights." "She's your mother," Kelly hissed. "Do something." "I already did," he said. "I forgot who she was." The rain softened their voices after that. I didn't move. Just let the petals fall into the soil as I clipped, one by one. That night, I sat by the fireplace in the guest house. The main house was dark. No lights, no movement. Evelyn had left an hour earlier with promises to return. I believed her. I believed in her. The next morning, the air was clearer. The sky washed clean. I opened every window in the house and let the breeze flow through. It carried out the old air, the heavy air, the kind filled with years of tiptoeing, of unspoken resentment, of swallowed pain. In its place came something lighter. At noon, a delivery van pulled into the drive. Boxes, luggage, a dresser, a mirror. John had called a moving service. They didn't knock. They didn't say goodbye. From the kitchen window, I watched as the van doors closed and the engine roared to life. John stood at the edge of the yard, one hand in his pocket, the other hanging loose at his side. He looked back once. I met his gaze through the window. He lifted his hand in a slow, small wave. I didn't return it. Not yet. The call came in the middle of the afternoon. I was in the kitchen, trimming the edges off a pie crust, Frank's old rolling pin still dusted with flour. The ringtone barely echoed before I picked up. I knew who it would be. "Mom?" John said, his voice worn thin. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I pressed the crust into the dish with slow, deliberate care. "Please," he added. I exhaled. "What time?" "Tonight, just us." "No Kelly?" "No Kelly." 7, I said. "Come to the main house, knock first." He was on time. That surprised me. He looked smaller than usual, like the weight of his own choices had finally settled on his shoulders. I let him in without a word. The house was warm. The fireplace flickered quietly, and the smell of cinnamon and apples lingered from the pie cooling on the counter. I gestured for him to sit at the table. He did, slowly. For a few minutes, we said nothing. The silence between us had grown into something dense, like a wall. He reached for a mug, the one I'd set for him, and held it without drinking. "I've been thinking," he said finally. I waited. "You were right, about everything." That should have brought comfort, but it didn't. It just felt overdue. "I don't know how we got here," he said, eyes on the wood grain in the table. "I mean, I do, but I didn't see it until it was too late." I sipped my tea, waiting. I let her speak for both of us. Let the house feel like hers. "I told myself you didn't mind, because you didn't complain." I set the cup down. "I didn't complain, John, because I was trying to protect what little dignity I had left. Not because I agreed." He nodded, slowly. "I know that now." Another pause. "You're not just my mother," he added. "You're this house, this land. You and Dad built it. I walked through it like I owned something I never earned." It was strange. The apology. Gentle. Humble. But still too late to change what had already been set in motion. "I can't take back what we did," he said. "But I want you to know. I'm not angry." "That's good," I said softly. "Because neither am I." He looked up then, eyes wet. "You're really not going to let us stay?" I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "You need to learn how to live without leaning on people you forget how to respect." He breathed in deep, held it, then let it out through his nose. Not in defiance, in acceptance. "I signed the lease on a rental across town," he said. "Small place, but it'll do for now." I nodded. "That's wise. I'd like Evelyn to keep visiting you. She's always welcome." He stood then, slowly, as if something in his bones was resisting the movement. I walked him to the door. No hug, no parting words. Just a quiet understanding, the kind that comes when the last piece of denial has been set down. He paused on the porch. "I never hated you," he said. "I never asked you to love me," I replied. "Only to see me." Then he left. I stood there, in the doorway of my home, watching the path he took down the gravel drive, and I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt whole again. And that was enough. They were gone by Sunday. No fanfare. No second goodbye. Just the hollow echo of the moving truck pulling away at sunrise. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. The silence afterward told me everything I had to know. I walked through the main house that afternoon like it was a new place. Not because anything had changed on the surface, the same paint, the same furniture, the same scent of lemon cleaner Kelly preferred, but because the tension had lifted. The walls, for the first time in years, weren't listening to resentment. The living room was bare now, strangely so. They had taken most of the photos, the coffee table books, the plastic bins of toys that had once cluttered the corners. Even the curtains were gone from the upstairs bedrooms. Kelly's touch had been efficient, sterile. What they hadn't taken was the dust. I opened every window in the house and began to clean. I didn't do it for them. I did it for myself, to reclaim the shape of the space. My pace was slow, not from age, but from intent. I wasn't rushing to erase them. I was reclaiming each corner with calm hands. Cloth over wood, warm water over glass, one window at a time. By the time the sun dipped low and golden across the back lawn, the kitchen glowed. I made tea in the kettle they'd left behind and drank it by the sink, watching the breeze lift the curtains in the breakfast nook. Frank would have liked this moment. He would have said, "You did right, Ida. Quiet right. The kind that holds." The next morning, I wandered into the garden. It was a mess, of course. The soil was dry, the mulch patchy, weeds clawing between the bricks of the path. But the bones of it were still there. The layout we'd designed in '85 when we thought we'd turn the yard into something out of a magazine. The raised beds were crooked now, but the time had survived. The mint had overtaken everything, wild and fragrant. I rolled up my sleeves. I worked until my back ached and the knees of my pants were brown. By mid-afternoon, I'd cleared half the walkway, tugged the weeds from around the bird bath, and found, beneath it all, a single violet crocus, already blooming out of season. I sat beside it in the grass, breathing in the clean air. My hands trembled from the effort, but I felt alive. Not young, not foolish like that, but grounded. A woman in her own story again. Later, Evelyn came by with a basket of groceries. "I thought you might be too tired to cook," she said. "I was too stubborn to rest," I replied. She laughed and joined me on the porch. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. She brought out 2 cups and filled them, and we sat as the sky changed color above the trees. The house behind us stood steady, quiet, entirely mine. For the first time in years, I didn't wonder what they were saying about me behind closed doors, because the only doors that mattered were open now, wide and waiting. The mornings felt different now. Not quieter. The quiet had always been there, but less heavy. Like the silence wasn't pressing in anymore, just existing around me, letting me breathe without asking questions. I woke early, before the sun, not out of habit or anxiety, but out of choice. There was a strange comfort in the still dark hours when the house was mine alone and the day hadn't yet decided what it would become. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and chopped apples, just the way Frank used to like it, though I never really cared for it back then. Now it tasted like steadiness, like memory. I ate by the window in the breakfast nook, where the early light spilled in soft and cold. The yard was wet from overnight dew. The crocus from the day before stood taller. I liked to think it was showing off. I had no appointments that day, no one to prepare for, no one expecting anything. It was a strange kind of freedom, not exciting, not loud, but still sharp. I didn't realize how long it had been since my time belonged only to me. By 9, I was in the garden again. There was something sacred about pruning, about deciding what stays and what must go. I worked slowly, carefully. I cut back the overgrowth, cleared space between the rows, uncovered bulbs I forgot we'd planted. I found a rusted trowel under one of the stepping stones, probably left there the last time John tried to help, years ago, before everything became layered in small slights and bigger silences. I didn't think about him much anymore, not out of anger, just clarity. The weight of him was gone, of all of them. Around noon, Evelyn arrived with a bundle of lavender in her arms. "For your dresser," she said. "Or the pantry." I smiled and kissed her cheek. She smelled like rosemary and car rides. We spent the afternoon replanting basil and parsley, her sleeves rolled up, dirt under her fingernails. "You ever think about renting the guest house?" she asked. "You could find someone quiet. An artist? A student?" "I'm not ready for a tenant," I said. "Not even me?" she teased. I looked at her, at the curve of her smile, so like her mother's once was, back when there was softness still. "I'd never charge you rent," I said. She didn't reply, just took my hand in hers, and we sat like that for a while, breathing in the lavender, the soil, the faint wind through the pines. When she left, I wandered back into the house. The walls didn't echo anymore. I think they finally understood I wasn't leaving. In the hallway, I passed a mirror and caught my reflection. Not younger, not softer, but clearer. There she was. The woman they thought had faded. Still here. The garden came back faster than I expected. It only took a little attention. Steady hands, sharp clippers, water at the right times. Within days, color began to creep across the yard like breath returning to a sleeping body. The mint stayed wild, of course. It always had a mind of its own. But the thyme thickened. The roses lifted. Even the dirt looked richer, like it was grateful to be noticed again. I began rising earlier still, just to walk the path before the day truly began. No shoes, no coat. Just me and the damp stone underfoot, soft moss along the edges. I carried a small notebook in my apron now. Nothing fancy, just a place to jot what needed doing. Trellis repairs, which herbs had taken, which needed thinning. There was comfort in a list made only for myself. One morning, I found a single tomato sprouting along the fence, grown from a long-forgotten seed. I didn't pull it. I staked it gently, gave it space. Things, it turns out, will grow where you least expect them. The house, too, began to shift. Not drastically. I didn't buy new furniture or strip the walls. But I opened more doors, let in more air. I moved back into the master bedroom. Took my time deciding which quilt to unfold onto the bed. Chose the one Frank never liked, all wild violets and tangled thread, because now I didn't need to compromise. The days passed gently. I cleaned the hallway closets, donated the things I no longer used. I found 3 coats I hadn't worn in a decade and wondered briefly who I had once been, holding on to things for lives I didn't live anymore. Sometimes I sat on the porch for hours without realizing the time. Just the wind and the creak of the swing and the scent of whatever was blooming nearby. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't waiting. I was just there. Evelyn visited often. She brought stories from school, photographs, new herbs to try. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she just sat with me while I finished my tea. "Why didn't you do this sooner?" she asked once. I looked out at the yard, at the curve of the garden wall, still chipped from the boys' soccer games. Because I thought if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, I wouldn't be left behind. She nodded, then whispered, "But they left anyway." They did. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. That night, after she left, I walked the house alone. I ran my fingers along the banister, paused at the photographs that still hung in the hallway. Me and Frank, our wedding, the early years with John, long before the hardening. I didn't take them down. They were still part of the story. But I did move them, off the main wall, to a smaller frame in the office. Not erased, just repositioned. Not forgotten, just put in their place. I slept well that night. No noise, no dreams, just the soft ache of a life being lived again. I wrote to Frank that morning, not out loud, not in a ceremony, just a letter on plain paper with the good pen he always kept by the ledger. The ink still flowed as if it had been waiting. I didn't begin with "Dear," I just started. They tried to send me away, Frank. Not with cruelty, not openly, but with that quiet, practiced indifference people use when they think you're no longer needed. They called it rest, care, a retreat, but what they meant was removal. I overheard it. That's how these things happen, isn't it? Truth always leaks out sideways. I paused, the pen warm in my hand. I wasn't ready to fight at first. Not because I was afraid, but because I had forgotten I was allowed to. I thought being silent made me kind. I thought not demanding anything made me easier to love. I underlined the next line without meaning to. It didn't. I let the page sit in front of me for a while before I went on. But you knew, didn't you? You knew this house had to stay in my name. You never said why. But you were always good at seeing the storms I pretended weren't coming. Thank you for leaving the deed where I could find it, for believing I'd use it when I needed to. I did. I'm still here, Frank. I stayed. Outside, the sun had just begun to stretch through the trees. The garden shimmered from the night's rain. I watched the light move across the floorboards as I wrote the next part. John and Kelly are gone now. Not far, but far enough. There was no screaming, no final act. Just the slow realization that they could no longer occupy what they never owned. I didn't throw them out. I just reminded them of what was true. I hesitated at the final paragraph. I'm not bitter. That surprised me. I thought I would be. But all I feel is clear. I walk through our rooms now and hear your voice again. Not as an echo, but as a presence. The faucet you hated still drips. The swing you built still creaks. And the woman you built this life with? She's still standing, Frank. Still choosing what stays and what goes. I signed it with just my name. No need for endings. This was never goodbye. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where we kept our old Christmas cards and the birth announcements of friends' children we lost touch with. A small, quiet archive of lives we'd witnessed. Then I stepped outside into the crisp air and let the wind lift the edges of my sleeves. The garden was waiting. And so was I. The first frost came overnight. Not heavy. Just a silvery glaze on the grass, a quiet warning that the season was changing. I opened the back door before the sun rose and stood on the porch, watching my breath in the cold air. The trees were almost bare now, their leaves curled and fallen, scattered like forgotten letters across the yard. It was beautiful in its way, this slow dying off, honest, undramatic. A kind of truth I'd come to understand. Inside, the house was still warm from the radiator. I lit the stove and made tea in the old blue kettle. The sound of it, the soft bubbling, the click of the burner, reminded me that not all comfort comes from other people. Some of it you build for yourself, one morning at a time. Evelyn called just after 8. Did you see the frost? She asked, already knowing the answer. I did, I said. It's a good day for soup. I'll bring bread, she replied, and we left it at that. After the call, I walked through the rooms, my daily ritual now. I'd come to know every corner again, every creak and uneven tile. I'd polished the banister by hand, scrubbed the floorboards in the upstairs hallway, rehung the kitchen clock. It was mine now, not just on paper, but in presence. Every detail bore my rhythm. I found myself humming as I dusted the mantel, not a song I recognized, just something soft and steady, like breath. The kind of sound that rises when the heart is finally unburdened. Around noon, I set the table for two. The good plates. Cloth napkins. I sliced apples into thin slivers and arranged them in a bowl. The house held its quiet like a promise. Evelyn arrived in a wool coat and muddy boots, cheeks pink from the wind. She held a loaf wrapped in a tea towel. Still warm, she said proudly. We ate slowly, without rush, talked about nothing urgent. She told me about her new roommate. I told her about the fox I'd seen near the shed. We laughed over how stubborn Mint can be. Then, when the meal was done, she looked at me with that thoughtful tilt of her head. You're different now, she said. I wiped my hands on the towel. How so? Not softer, she said. Stronger, but not loud about it. Just certain. I nodded. That's what happens when you remember who you were before they told you to be less. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, Do you think they'll ever come back? Not to live, just to visit. They might, I said. And if they do, they'll knock first. She smiled at that. We cleared the table together, washed the dishes, folded the towel she brought the bread in. Small acts. Gentle ones. No ceremony. When she left, I stood at the window again, watching her walk to her car. I thought of all the years I'd waited for someone to see me, and how, in the end, it was me who had to step forward first. The wind picked up as I closed the door behind her. Leaves rustled along the porch. The house settled into itself. And so did I. I don't know who needs to hear this. Maybe you, maybe someone you haven't become yet. But I'll say it plainly. They will forget you if you let them. They will take and smile while they do it. But if you hold your ground, if you speak, even quietly, they will hear. And if they don't, you will still be standing. So take your time. Make your tea. Unlock your own front door. And stay. This story is mine. But maybe, now, it's a little bit yours too. If it spoke to something in you, leave a comment. Share it. Let someone else remember who they are.